Okay, so hi, good afternoon, everybody, or morning, depending on where you're coming from. Welcome to our webinar on reducing cyber risk on a practical level, putting theory into practice. I'll just say a couple of words about the agenda. First of all, we're going to hear from our keynote speaker, Ori Shahar, about the actual practicalities of how cybersecurity works and in what ways organizations can actually reduce their risk. And after that, we'll go through the answer to the challenge that Promisec has created. So first of all, I'd just like to introduce Ori. Hi. So Ori has spent over 20 years in elite technological units in the Israel Defense Forces, and he was personally awarded the Israel Defense Prize for leading cutting-edge projects in the Israeli cyber divisions. He's the former executive director and head of cyber operations at the Israeli National Cyber Directorate. And today, Ori runs CYDERO, which is a cybersecurity company which works with clients all over the world. So Ori, our keynote speaker, is speaking on the practicalities of reducing cyber risk. Ori, take it away.
Thank you very much, Nesher. Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with all of you today here. When I thought of what should we talk about, a recent cyber event that we should maybe discuss, I thought it would be best to choose an event that is relevant to most organizations. If you know, for sure you've heard about the SolarWinds cyber breach, which is a very, very high media focus and very, let me say, a very sexy attack. But it's a superpower attacking one other superpower, very, very sophisticated cyber event. And in my personal opinion, most organizations don't have many takeaways to take from this, besides the fact that it's very interesting. So for me and for, I guess, for everybody, it was very interesting. But we wanted to focus on something that should be relevant to most organizations. And this is what we decided to talk about. So we'll talk about the Colonial Pipeline breach that happened less than 2 months ago. So three things are very interesting in this breach. First, the victim. The victim is a very big American company, the Colonial Pipeline. It's responsible for almost half of the gasoline in the East Coast, delivering gasoline from Texas all the way through 17 states in the East Coast of the US. It's part of the energy sector, critical infrastructure, for sure under cyber regulations, safety regulations, and still it was breached, and it was breached by a ransomware. So this is the first thing that is very interesting here. Secondly, the dark side, which is the attacker group. This is, as we'll show a bit more later, they are a ransom attack group, very active in the last year. They are operating since August of last year. And they are, I think they are very interesting because of the fact that when we think of a ransomware, we usually think of something that is very simple, and we take it maybe lightly, maybe too lightly. And I think this group and this incident may show us the reference. So when we come to plan our cyber posture plans for our organization, this is the new ransomware reference that we should take. There are many more groups like them, but they are representing the compass that we should be facing when we are talking about the modern ransomware, which is present in the last year. Lastly, the incident itself is very interesting because it was a very fast incident from the first breach that the attackers successfully made into the company until the actual encryption of their entire assets. It was just over a week, and the result is also very painful. So the organization decided to shut down its operation and to pay 75 Bitcoins, which is over $4 million at that time. So just a brief about ransomware. I'm sure everybody knows about ransomware. So as we know, the ransomware cyber attack, it could come into the organization through phishing, through malicious link, through many other ways of entering. And this is something that everybody knows. What is interesting is the double extortion ransomware. This is a new operational method practiced by a lot of attackers in the last year. And what they are doing is they are extracting, they are exfiltrating the sensitive data of the organization before the actual conduction of the encryption, before delivering the hammer on the head of the victim. And then they have a double pressure mechanism. So the organization has the effect of the entire sensitive data encrypted, and also they have the threat that their sensitive data of their customers, of themselves, would be released, and causing a lot of embarrassment. So this is a new method causing a huge pressure on the victims and probably assisting the attackers to get what they want, which is the payment. If we look at the trends of the last year, we can see that the costs of ransomware attacks have doubled in 2020, and the amount of cyber attacks has tripled. So when we come to plan our plans and to assess where are we standing in our organizations, we must take the ransomware threat as one of the big references to be prepared for in cyber today. Okay, so let's discuss the breach, the company and the breach itself. So as we started to talk about the Colonial Pipeline, it has been it was been in operation like almost more than 50 years ago, and it was continuously in operation until this breach. And it supplies almost half of the gasoline to the East Coast of the US. The breach started, the cyber researchers who researched the breach concluded that the attack started on the April 29th, when they gained the initial access to the Colonial Pipeline network. And on May 7th, they released the ransomware note demanding the ransomware payment. The result was that very quickly, the management of the Colonial Pipeline declared a shutdown. They closed the entire operation for the first time. And this caused the US authorities to declare a regional emergency for all the 17 states that are using the Colonial Pipeline gasoline services. Eventually, very quickly, the company paid the ransomware fee, which was over $4 million. If we look at the timeline, which is, as we said, it's very unusual, very fast. When we usually describe attacks, we are talking about 3-4 months of a period where the attackers move, lateral movement, reach the entire assets that they want to attack within the organization. Here, just over a week and a half, and that's it, starting at April 29th, and then releasing the ransom notes in the May 7th. Quite quickly, the company, as we said, shut down its operation. The CEO of Colonial Pipeline, he was interviewed, and he said, because of the fact that they are critical energy company, their pipe is very sensitive. If somebody attacks it in a terror attack, it could cause huge harm to the US infrastructure. So at the time of the attack, they weren't sure who are the attackers, what are their motivations, whether this could be a terrorist attack maybe. So they decided to take action and to one-sidedly shut down their operations until they understand what's the incident they're facing. And of course, the authorities were involved, and the FBI investigated and concluded that indeed the ransomware group behind this is the dark side group. And the amount of media focus on this incident and the amount of, and the effect of the shutdown on these 17 states caused a lot of things that we will touch in a minute. This was a double extortion attack. So the attackers successfully stole 100 gigabytes, over 100 gigabytes of data, and they practiced the double extortion, and eventually the company paid over $4 million. What's interesting is that the FBI and the US authorities, because of this effect, because of the huge effect, because of the huge damages here and the potential damages, they actually went to a large effort to retrieve the money and to harm the operations of the dark side group. And they were successful to some extent. They seized a lot of servers of the dark side group and recovered just under 64 Bitcoins, which in that period of time, the Bitcoin went down. So the amount is over $2 million that they successfully retained back. If we look at what happened, how did they get the initial access? So it seems that they had a VPN account that wasn't in use, and the attackers had the password to this account. The password later was discovered in a batch, in a leaked batch in the dark web. So we're not sure how the attackers got the VPN user account and the password, if it's the same password that was leaked, or maybe somebody was using the same password for different accounts. But in any case, this VPN wasn't exercising multi-factor authentication, so the username and password by themselves were enough to gain this initial access. If we look at more insights, the fact that the lateral movement and operation within the Colonial Pipeline network was so fast, just as we said, over a week and a half, this is very unusual and very interesting here. Another thing that is interesting and maybe a bit reassuring is the fact that the motivation was only financial and there was no indication of access to the OT or ICS systems of the pipeline, the actual systems that operate the controllers and the sensitive pumps and everything. So the only access was gained to the IT infrastructure. And in our experience, I would say in a very delicate way, this effect of entering without anybody noticing that something is happening behind their noses, the ability to extract and exfiltrate over 100 gigabytes of data within a couple of days, the effect of deleting backups and the encryption of many servers, this should be an indication that something is not working properly and they were lacking, or this organization may lack visibility to what's going on within their networks. And they have a lot of vulnerabilities that attackers could have used. So let's touch the dark side group. So this is the modern groups that are now conducting crime in the cyberspace. They are operating, as we said, since August 2020. Just a moment. They are operating since August 2020. And they have been very, very successful. The recent research shows that they have gained more than $90 million in ransomware payments in this period of time, which gives them just more motivation to continue and increase this operation. They are working like a complete ecosystem. It's like a startup company with an ecosystem. We will soon see their dashboard. And they call themselves RAS, Ransomware as a Service. They have profit sharing between the partners and affiliates, and it depends on the part of each one of the parties. And they provide the entire platform, the entire technology to do these bad things to the victims. And as we said, the operation, until the effect of the US authorities fighting back, was that they increased continuously their amount of victims. And because of this sophistication, because of this large operation, they are considered a high threat. This is just to look at their ecosystem. We can see from in the right side, the dashboard that they provide their affiliates. One can choose if they want to encrypt a Linux machine or a Windows machine. They can choose how they contact their victim organization, how they do all the discussions, how do they launder the money, and which ways. And the actual first part, the lateral movement and the operation in which the attackers gain access and delete the sensitive data is manually operated. So it's human cyber criminals behind the keyboards conducting this operation. So this is the dark side group. If we look at the key takeaways we can see from this case. So first, if we want to achieve a cyber posture, we must have visibility. Visibility is a key. Visibility could allow us to see entities or parts of the architecture that are not aligned with the policy we have. For example, the multi-factor authentication within the VPN, or unused user accounts and credentials. And also within the organization, if there is an anomaly that suddenly the sensitive databases are extracting a lot of data, something that wasn't a day before, or a week before, or a month before. So all of these, if we have a good visibility, we might have had a lot of areas in which we could see that something bad is happening within the network. Secondly, the way to fight ransomware, the most effective one is to have an effective backup plan, effective continuity plan, and if there is a double extortion incident, of course, it is very embarrassing to an organization if somebody leaks their data, but it's more embarrassing that you don't have a backup and you cannot get back to normal and to business as usual operation. And if you do have a backup, an effective one, and you do have a continuity plan that you have practiced before, you can mitigate the attack and get back to business as usual very fast. The third one is the reducing of cyber risk. This is a very Sisyphic effort. We all know that we want to patch the entire equipments, different equipments, the endpoints, the firewalls, the databases, the servers that we have. We should be disciplined. In big organizations, we need to have a full visibility and we need to ask a lot of questions. Later on, we will see some case studies. So think of what should you do when you have a critical patch of Microsoft updated now, and you need to flood it and to ensure that it is uploaded within the entire organization. Last takeaway, I think it's a very optimistic one, is the actions that were taken by the US authorities here. So they actually fought back and they punished the attackers. They took down their operations. They seized their servers. They successfully found a server that had a key, a private key of the Bitcoin wallets that were used to store the stolen money. And this is how they regained the Bitcoins that were paid in this incident. So this is a very refreshing takeaway, a very refreshing thing that happened here. So that's it. And now I'm heading to Nesher's hands. Thank you, guys.
Okay, thanks, Ori. Thanks for that illuminating talk on the practicalities of reducing cyber risk. Okay, so what I want to do next is I want to demonstrate and present you the answer to this challenge that we're faced. And before I start, I'd like to say I'll draw your attention. There's a Q&A section down below. So if there's any questions, technical questions, practical questions, you're welcome to float them there, and we'll address them once we've gone through the solution. Okay, so we've said that endpoint security begins with visibility. And the paradigm that Ori has presented is that oftentimes the real challenge is finding all the little places, all the little gaps and security vulnerabilities in which could be exploited, in a potential attack. And how do you patch those? How do you, in a network, I'm sure many of you have networks of thousands or tens of thousands of endpoints. How do you contend with that difficulty to make sure that all the little I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed to ensure that you're really safe? So if we'll just go over here, these are some of the use cases which I'll call your attention to in a moment. So first, I'll just show you our tool. So what you're looking at here is the Promisec Endpoint Manager dashboard, right? We call it PEM, just for short. And what the dashboard does is it answers this challenge of taking thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of little irregularities, little things which could be used as a weakness to exploit and to compromise or to otherwise wreak havoc in your network. And I'll explain how that works. So the idea is, the principle is, there is a policy that you define. You say this would be secure, and you can define it automatically according to NIST or CIS or a bunch of standard best practices which are considered secure. And once you've done that, you can say any deviation of any endpoint on my network will be noticed as an issue. And that's something that I can then go in and remediate. And instead of just having a general idea of, I have an antivirus and I think it's fine and I think it's up, you can actually see, is it deployed? So I'll just talk you through the dashboard a little bit, just so you know what I mean by that solution. So first of all, the primary challenge in contending with, as we said, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of issues is their number. You're swimming in a sea of information. Even if you query all the endpoints, which is great, you still find yourself struggling to say, okay, what do I do first though? Where's the actual information? What do I address? So let's just go over the components of this dashboard. The first one over here on the left is the statistics. And what this tells you is we're answering a few very simple questions, which is what and where and what I do about it, right? So the first question is what's wrong? What's my actual status? So here, through a few different categories, there's a bird's eye view breakdown of what's actually going on. If I jump on over to the compliance, for example, there's a few central, most important and most critical issues which we find often need to be remediated. So for example, I'll show it to you in the view in a second as well, but let's just say endpoints with antivirus issues. This is a very common compliance issue, which is to say, I have this EDR or this antivirus, and it's great, and I've paid for it, and it's deployed in my organization. But do I have a way to know where it's actually reached? Is it on all my endpoints? Is it deployed everywhere? Is it enabled everywhere? Are there updated versions of it on every one of my endpoints? It's sometimes very hard to know. So here, what the endpoint manager can do is it sort of acts as a watchdog to any other service that you might be using. And it says here, of your endpoints, which I can see the 79 endpoints in this current, this test scenario, which we're working on here, I can see which ones are updated or not updated. And so the same is true for any other one of the metrics which have been identified as a problematic in some way, whether it's active CVEs or something that's missing or a blacklist item. A blacklist item, for example, would be an application which you've configured as not optimal, which you don't want to have, in your network. So if I'll just give a quick example of that, right? So okay, so I have what's wrong, and now I go over to the view. So the view is a component which shows me where it is, because again, when working with a big network, I need to know where the problem is so that I can then contend with it. So in order to work with this, you've got all these groupings. So there's a few default groupings, which is the ones you can see here, which are by VLAN, which is to say not logical network segmentation. And you could also present it by the OS types, which is to say the builds. But you can create a group out of anything that you like, because you in your organization, every organization has their own needs. You might say, I want to split it up by department. I want to see how we're doing on this one ad hoc project, and I'll configure a few endpoints to be part of that. Or I can say the executive suite in my company, as they often are the target of many attacks, and their computers are the most vulnerable and the most sensitive to attack. If they're compromised, it's the worst blow. So I'll create a group just of that. And what that allows me to do is it allows me to focus in and zoom in on where the issues are and to start to deal with them. That's the view components, and I'll demonstrate how that works a little further in a moment. Over here in the details, what I've got is a further breakdown, because we're slowly zooming in from left to right. This shows me the actual identified most severe issues which I have to remediate in my organization. As you can see, there's quite a lot of them, right? So there's still a lot of issues to contend with. So how do we winnow it down? How do we find the actual things that I need to fix when, again, we're in a sea of information? So what I'm going to show you here, this is the filter. And it's got this default filtration to give me a sort of beginning spot. But what I can use this with, I can add things to my filter and focus in on what I want to work with. So for example, let's say I want to make sure that I'm remediating all the critical security gaps in a certain build. So I've got a group of that, of the Windows 10 enterprise computers, and I could say, add that to filter. And if I'll just jump over to the use cases here, right? What could I be looking for, just to illuminate the kind of things that we might be using? Because obviously we won't get into all of them, because we're trying to make a quick run through. So for example, I've got a critical Windows update. Do I have it everywhere? I know there was this CVE, and Microsoft quickly released a patch. Do I have it on all my endpoints? Or as we mentioned before, the EDR solution, is it active everywhere? I have an application which I'm suddenly worried that I've seen active somewhere in the network. And I can quickly narrow it down and say, let's filter by that one application, that one blacklist application. And then it'll show me all the endpoints where I have it. And I very quickly have a to-do list of things that I need to fix to be compliant on that one issue. Okay, so what we've done here, just to demonstrate how that's worked, we've added this group to the filter. So now our group of endpoints that we're looking at through the filter is 5. And the number of issues that we're looking at are only the issues which are relevant to those 5 endpoints. As you can see, it's still a lot of issues. These are pretty, obviously this is a test case, but these are some pretty non-compliant endpoints. So obviously the other charts, of course, are accordingly updated, and the details over here as well. I didn't touch on the trends yet, so I'll just mention this. What this does here, the trends, it allows me, for the executives or for somebody who's tracking the metrics of some kind of progress, it allows me to see whether I have a positive or a negative trend. So for example, let's just say as a use case, I want to say I want all of my endpoints to be compliant from an antivirus perspective. I can see already here on these, in the current selection, that none of my computers have a CVE, an active CVE, that all of them have antivirus issues of one kind or another, which means I need to deep dive a little bit more to see what, but I know that they either don't have it deployed or updated or enabled. I can see that 100% of them have blacklist applications present on the endpoints, and one of them has a OS security update, which is missing. I can see that at a glance before I've needed to dive in too much. But I say, okay, wait, before I dive in a little more than that, I might say this is still a lot of issues, right? So they're sorted by severity, but I can add another line to my filter. Let's say just add a rule, right? If I just want to find the ones which are the most egregious, so I can find, first of all, I'll fix the really problematic ones. So I'll just sort by issue severity, and I'll say high. Below high, it'll be filtered out. So it'll take a second to load, because obviously we're going through the whole database of your organization. But once I've loaded it in, now I can see that I'm down to 10 issues. So very quickly I've said, okay, this group of computers which I've configured, what are their issues? Oh, you know what, that's still too many. I need to find first the critical ones. And I've added another line to the filter, which shows me just the critical ones. So now I've got a very manageable list of only the most critical issues which I need to deal with. And I can say, okay, so what are those issues? In order to then remediate, and in order to then use that knowledge which I've gained from filtering, I can go down a little bit more and deep dive all the way to the level of the singular endpoint and the single issue that I have to remediate. And that I can use in order to fix problems. Because if I zoom out again, right? What we want to do, what we know the challenge is actually keeping my organization secure by closing all the little gaps. It's not enough oftentimes to just purchase some expensive security solution and say, okay, I have this most advanced DDR and now I'm covered, because often it's the little things that you don't notice. It's, it's the passwords, or it's the updates, or some security thing, or some application which you weren't taking into account. It's all these little things. And what PEM allows you to do is contend with this veritable sea of information and quickly narrow it down to the things that you need and find the actual problems so that I can quickly become more secure. And of course, all of this is, methodological, and you can create your own filters and apply them as you like. And, there's more features that I don't have time to get into, of different types, but, that's just a very quick overview of what I can do with the dashboard. Okay, so that was that run through. What I'll do now is, I see that a bunch of people have asked questions in the Q&A section. If anybody has more questions which have come up as I've talked us through this functionality, you're welcome to send more, but I'll start by answering the questions which I already have here. Okay, so somebody asked me, can you help my organization be compliant to accepted best practices and compliance standards? So yes, this is something that we work from. We're not just taking a general type of things which we deem to be wrong, but instead our policies, the default policy, which you can configure to say, this is how I want my endpoints to be, this would be considered compliant. You can start that, I mean, obviously you can change it however you like, but you can start that from saying, okay, let's start with NIST compliance or CIS compliance or some other accepted best practice security standard. And that is what will be considered compliant. And any deviation from that will be the issues that I deal with. Somebody asked, okay, so again, this is tying back to what Ori spoke about, this ransomware. We were talking about the case study of how actual malicious actors act nowadays. What they do is we often need to contend with ransomware. So as Ori said, part of our answer to ransomware is obviously a very catch-all solution, which is have good backups. But before that, before the level of, where I've already been compromised and I'm dealing with that and I have to somehow reconstitute my whole network, to not allow that to happen, PEM can be a very instrumental tool. Because with an endpoint manager, I have full visibility. And to enact ransomware or deploy it within my organization, I would need to first get access to the organization and spread laterally with lateral movement throughout the organization and go undetected and be able to infect different computers with whatever ransomware I'm using. So with every stage that I just described, you would be stopped on a network which is using compliance management, because the suspicious application or the suspicious thing that would be dropping the initial malware, might be detected. And the antivirus on every computer, which might be, potentially infected with such a thing, would be, I would ensure that it's up to date and I would know how to catch on to these things. So the general enforcing of correct cyber hygiene before the stage where we get to, dealing with ransomware as a solution, as a situation which is already upon us, you would deal with it proactively in advance. So somebody asked, is this a new dashboard? It looks totally different. So yeah, of course. I don't know exactly who asked this question, but we've had a few versions of dashboards. And what we're looking at here is the latest version of the PEM dashboard, because we keep, as we progress and we add new features and new functionality. This is a developing progress, a developing feature, let's say product, which is constantly adding new functionality and new things. I think those are all the relevant questions. I would say in general, I don't want to get too into it. Technical questions, we'd be happy to answer in offline. I don't want to get into them too specifically. Okay, so I think that concludes the Q&A, unless anybody has any more question. So somebody asked again, does the tool help from protecting from ransomware? So I'll reiterate, it doesn't constitute a backup solution, which is not what this does, but it does provide you the ability to ensure as much as possible that your organization is secure from ransomware ever getting access to your network. And if some malicious actor does get access to your network, which, God forbid, this endpoint manager would help ensure that they wouldn't be able to spread laterally throughout the network. So at those two stages, which are the critical stages for actually deploying some kind of malware, you would be protected by Promisec Endpoint Manager. So I think that concludes for now the section of the Q&A. Those are the use cases. We've been over this. I could just mention the last one. For example, if you add a new endpoint to your network, this is also another thing, because you need to quickly bring new endpoints up to par. If you've got a new worker, if you've just integrated something new, you can very quickly see them from A to B. It doesn't matter if they've been queried before. Once the second you've added them to your network, they're part of your policy compliance system.
Michelle, just a question here: is this available? Is this dashboard available to customers? And is it part of the PAM 6.4? And the answer,
right, so
yes.
Yeah, or you want to answer?
You can answer. Go
yeah,
ahead.
Sure. So yes, dashboard that we're just looking at now is the current available dashboard. It's deployed with some of our customers. We're rolling it out now because this is a very new version which is just rolled out. Anybody who gets PAM now, this will be the dashboard that you will be working with. This is not like some eventual product that we're hoping to disseminate. This is the current dashboard that we work with. Somebody else mentioned in a question agents. This is a somewhat technical question. How do you know how many systems have your agents? So this is actually a very interesting question because we don't use agents as a rule. We do have a system in which you could integrate remote computers, which would be slightly separate. But in general, PAM functionality does not rely upon agents. You don't have to install or deploy agents on all the endpoints in your network, and rather there's a different system where you query endpoints, and in that sense, it runs much lighter than another kind of manager, which might otherwise require you to install agents on your network. Okay, so these are the use cases. That was the Q&A. All right, I think that pretty much brings us to the conclusion of this little webinar. Thank you again, Ori, for your illuminating talk.
You want to answer the last question?
Did another question just come up? Oh, somebody just asked. Okay, I'm sorry if people are asking just as we're closing up. But it's an important question. Does your tool cover work from home users? So yes, actually, this is a feature that we have. Despite the security, together with the security of an agentless solution, which is contained entirely on-premise, we do have the additional functionality of working from home, wherein PAM will communicate through secure channels with remote endpoints. And as far as the UI is concerned, as far as the user is concerned, it's integrated seamlessly. Like your endpoints, your remote endpoints, if you have somebody working in a different country or from home or something which is very common in the current paradigm, people often working in hybrid environments or working from home, then yes, we have the functionality to integrate these computers, and they appear in the same way, and through the same dashboard, you can query and scan and bring to compliance these remote computers. Okay, so I think that concludes what we're speaking about. And if there's any further questions, you're welcome to follow up. We'd love to hear from you. And for further details about PAM, please contact Chaim at Promisec, who's our CBO, and he'll be happy to help you with any questions that you might have. Thank you, everybody, so much for being with us today. And we look forward to hearing from you.